So there's a lot to say about Dante in this console, so I'm just going to kind of quickly overview the problems that you might encounter. You'll be using this most of the time at Nescom to drive front of house, so it'll be connecting with the Rio rack set up on stage. If you're watching this video right now because you have a troubleshooting problem, let me just go over some quick things to look for. Make sure the two units are connected together, the Rio rack and the CL3. And of course, there can be all sorts of patching things in between that I can't show you in this video through the walls and through the ports and the connections and all that stuff. But the main thing is you go up to this IO device tab and you click on it. And there's a list of IO devices that could be connected to the CL3. The top two here are the Rio rack. There's two of them, right? We've got the big one and the little one. The big one sits on top of the little one. And this is the 3324 and this is the, what is it, 3216? No, I forgot what it's called. It's the 1608, of course. It's like the API console. So these are popping up. And I know they're working right now, and I know they're connected because they're not yellow. When they say virtual below them, they are not connected. So you need to either run your cables, or be patient, because sometimes it can take a minute or two before they mount up on the system. Or sometimes you have to physically disconnect the the Dante, like on the input of the back of the console, and plug it back in. If we look at the back of the console, I also know they're talking because I can see flashing lights on the Dante primary port, and I've connected it to the primary port. But sometimes I do have to pull it and re-plug it back in and wait sometimes up to a minute for it to join back up. So sometimes it's a little slow. But if you do see them, then you're in business. You know you're connecting to the Dante, to the Rios. And what you see when you click these buttons here is a physical layout of what the outputs are sourced to on those racks. And it's a bit random right now, and that happens a lot here at Nescom because these get used for a lot of different things, so you'll end up having to patch these. And unfortunately, these patches do not necessarily get completely stored in the scenes. So you may have to troubleshoot your way out of some mess on this. Dante patch. Let's talk about inputs before outputs. If we go to the Dante patch, you can accomplish all this with Dante controller on your laptop. If you plug your laptop into the Dante network and you have Dante controller on it, which is free, you can accomplish all this. It's actually simpler on your laptop, but I'll show you how to do it here. If we go to Dante patch, you get a couple options here: input patch and output port setup. Let's look at the input patch. This is, are the Rio rack inputs coming into the console and are on correct Dante channels? And if I click input patch, this is kind of a great moment because we're looking at it, the way it was left from the other day is it's not patched correctly. You can see the Rios start coming in, these Y2011, those are the Rio racks. The Rios are patched very nicely through 48 of the input 48 of the console, but the first 10 have been disconnected by somebody. And that's no good because that means input 1 on the Rio is not going to work on this console. And there's a really easy way to solve this problem. You can go through here and patch the Dante yourself, or as I said a moment ago, you could use Dante controller. We could go, hey, Dante 1, please source from in 1 from Rio number 1. And that means Rio input number 1 from the top Rio is now feeding Dante 1. You can solve it that way and go through the next 10. But what is cool about this console is I have programmed for us kind of a default patch. If you go to library and you go Nescom normal and hit recall and say okay, it will recall all 48 inputs. So it's just patch normal. Now the Rio 1 through 48 feeds Dante 1 through 48, which on a default preset, if you load up the initialized preset on this console, it shows up per channel already patched for you. So that's kind of nice. Now, what's a bummer about this desk, and I'd like to punch somebody for this, there is no way to store patches for the outputs. I can't store a library for output patches for the console. So you do have to learn how to do this. And it's currently in default mode, and I mean default as in came from the factory. You're pretty far away from it, James. Can you actually see everything? Oh, yeah. It's in default mode from the factory, but it's not kind of in Nescom default mode, and this happens a lot. And what's happening here is Dante outputs, and it's confusing here. I'm talking about the Dante channels between the console and Rio, right? There's a freeway between the console and the Rio, and that freeway is called Dante. And these are like lanes on the freeway. And these lanes can have anything go on it on the console and anything come off it to any output, but these are the lanes in between. And by default, Dante lanes 33, 34, and 35 well, really, 30, 33, and 34 are the stereo bus Dante outputs. So this, by default, this console, and the way it often loads up is that the stereo bus feeds 33 and 34. And that interferes with our Cashman template, because on Cashman, we need to use all the first 48 to be direct outs of the console to go to the record rig. So we can't have the stereo bus right in the middle interrupting channels 33 and 34 as direct out. So what we do is we move the stereo bus to 49 and 50. And if you're doing front of house, if you're using subs on aux or subs on a mono fader or something kind of creative like that, we always put the subs on 51 as well. So I'm going to pick 49 and I'm going to say, hey man, 49 should be stereo, ST, left. And I'm going to press the button, which is going to move to Dante, the plus button, which is going to move to Dante 50. And I'm going to say, Dante 50, I want it to be stereo bus. And maybe you want to use the mono fader as your sub, or maybe you want to use subs on aux, so maybe you'd go up to mix and say, I'd like mix 1. Don't forget to make it post fader, because sub mixes are usually post fader. Mix 1, I want that to be on Dante 51. So now we have a situation where the stereo bus is on 49, 50, and 51. Now, we still have an issue for the Cashman show that this is all incorrect. Luckily, I can open up Dante Controller and set that up on Cashman show and make this 1 through 48 direct out. But at least for you getting sound at front of house through the Gray CPA, you've got the stereo bus 49, 50, 51. Now, you're not done yet. You still have to go over to the I.O. device and say, hey, I.O. device, I.O. tab, I would like, it's already set up that way because it was already run that way before. The physical jacks 1, 2, 3 of the Rio, the output jacks 1, 2, 3 are set to be stereo left, stereo right, and mix 1. Really what they're set to is Dante 49, 50, and 51. But the console is showing you what is patched across those freeway channels. I know this is confusing. There's no way for this not to be confusing. But if I click on output 1, it says what's patched there is Dante channel 49, which is the stereo bus, Dante channel 50, which is stereo bus, and Dante channel 51, which is mix 1. If I click on these, I could change this, and I could pick what I want, and what I want, of course, is 49, 50, and 51. So I know this is very confusing. It takes a while to wrap your brain around the fact that you can patch onto the Dante network from the console and patch off the Dante network from the Rio rack. And there's this thing in between called Dante. I know it's confusing, but you have to wrap your head around it. Hence this extra video here for people that are struggling. But now this output number 1 is our left, that's our right, and that's our sub, which of course at this moment is mix number 1. Cool, you can end the video.